Have you ever been at a job interview and wondered, is this really a place where I can be myself? Hi, I'm Brett, the Audi Boss, and on this channel I talk about ADHD and autism in the workplace. I'm Brett. I have over 10 years of leadership training and experience. As I got to thinking about my next job and job interview, I started to wonder how and if I want to bring up that I'm neurodivergent, and also how do I safely talk about my queer identity? Today I'm talking about someone who helps answer these exact questions. Alex Lahmeyer is a queer, non-binary, and neurodivergent career coach and talent consultant who helps people take the guesswork out of career moments that matter. They've coached dozens of LGBTQ+ and allied professionals to make sense of the mess, find career clarity, and plan their next step with confidence. As a consultant, they've empowered over 25 organizations to design more inclusive workplaces through their consulting and facilitation work. Alex has been featured as a subject matter expert in over 30 articles, videos, and podcasts on people strategy and career navigation, including outlets such as Fast Company, Lattice, Culture Amp, and Recruiting Daily. Alex also helps organizations create employee resource groups too, which is something I'm both a big fan of and I like talking a lot about here on this channel. We'll dive into that as well. But first, I wanted to ask Alex about how we do our best work when we find each other and are in affinity spaces.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think it's something that so often we feel kind of innately when we're in the moment, but we maybe don't always pick up on exactly why. I think we don't realize it until we're in spaces where we don't see other people who are like us. We don't feel like there are people who understand us. Something I talk a lot about in my work with organizations is this idea of psychological safety. Feeling safe to speak up, feeling safe to take risks, where you don't feel like you're going to be punished or judged, or there's going to be some kind of negative consequences. And there's a lot of research over the years that draws this connection between psychological safety and performance. And, whether it's work performance or just like doing well at something, hobby, a task or whatever. So when we're the only person in the room, we're going to spend so much of our energy like trying to assess the situation. And so rather than just focusing on the actual task or the work, we're constantly like, okay, is everyone around me understanding what I'm saying or how I'm coming across? Especially, I think one of the interesting things about some queer identities and neurodivergent identities is there's this aspect of sort of masking or covering and disclosure. And so you're almost kind of negotiating in the moment about like, how much do I want to share right now? So when all of your brain power is going to that, instead of actually just doing the work, we just don't do as well. So when we're in a space where we feel like people get us and aren't going to judge us or misunderstand us, we feel safer, and just more cognitive energy really goes toward the work itself.
I definitely feel that when I'm in spaces, especially when I've been in like ERG spaces where I know everybody's also queer and I know everybody's also neurodivergent, there's like a certain shift in me, like that masking comes off a little bit, my shoulders relax a little bit, and I feel more of a creative energy. How do we ask about culture in a workplace during the course of an interview to make sure that workplace culture is a good fit for us?
So often when we think about interviewing, we think about this really pronounced power dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
We go into this conversation with maybe one, two, maybe many people. We think, okay, these people have decision-making power, like they're going to do this, they're going to make this decision that's going to change my life potentially. So we raise the stakes and we create this really imbalanced power dynamic, which, there's some truth to that. But I think often we forget that we have some power in these moments as well. We still have agency. So I always like to encourage folks to think about workplace inclusion as kind of this two-way assessment. So yes, they might be evaluating you for alignment with, the job responsibilities and what the competencies, things they're looking for in candidate or in their next hire. I always say, like, go in and be really clear about what's important to you, what you need in a workplace, what you value in a workplace, and make sure you have that in mind as you're going into an interview setting. I always say just do some research beforehand, go check careers pages, check companies' social media, you could look at Glassdoor, look for patterns in some recent months or years. I wouldn't go back like 5 years. I don't think it's going to be the most representative of the culture. But go in, do some research, and make sure you're comfortable with what you find. When you go into the actual an interview setting, there's always going to be like 5 or 10 minutes at the end of most sessions where they say like, what questions do you have for me? I always tell people, be really specific about the questions that you ask, rather than saying, how does your company think about DEI? Like, that's a really broad question. You'll probably get a broad answer. To be able to say like, regular time with your manager is really important to you. That's an important part of the workplace culture, that your manager has a vested interest in checking in with you. People say like, I do my best work when I get regular one-on-one time with my manager. How do you enable managers to have the time and space and resources to be able to do this? Be strategic about the questions.
Yeah. Well, and that segues into my next question, which is about how can we safely ask about LGBTQ plus inclusion during the job interview process?
Yeah, this was tricky because, as I was saying before, there's kind of this element of outing or disclosing something, and there are going to be some questions that candidly might out you. And so I always tell people, like, figure out, like, again, what is most important to you, and also how much of yourself do you want to share in this moment. Again, I would pick really specific topics that are important to you. So maybe it's having all gender restrooms if you're interviewing for jobs in an office or some kind of physical space. Maybe it's about regular pronoun usage and how do people ensure that people are sharing and asking about pronouns in a respectful way. Maybe you're curious about how the organization helps employees build community. So looking at things like affinity spaces, employee resource groups, things that are intentionally designed, like be able to ask specific questions about the things that matter to you, and then kind of like calibrate based on your comfort level and what you feel like is going to get you the greatest signal for what you need.
Well, and I love that suggestion about employee resource groups, because that's sort of the safest way in, because most corporations, it sort of feels standard to have an employee resource group or some variation of that now. And if you're asking about a Pride or an LGBTQ plus resource group, that seems like a pretty safe way to sort of ask that without outing too much in some capacity. But let's say, for example, somebody says we don't have an employee resource group, and you either you're at an existing company that doesn't have one, or you can offer, I can help start one, or can I start one at this new job if I take this job and I start here. You have a background in sort of helping people get them started and get them off the ground. How do we go about doing that? How do we actually start an employee resource group?
$1 million question. I would say, I'll caveat all of this with just, you don't necessarily need a sort of like a structured formal ERG to be able to build and find community. I think to your point earlier, we find each other somehow. It's happened in a lot of my previous jobs, and I worked in offices. Like somehow I managed to find all the queer people that I never even worked with day to day. Kind of like, it's this sort of like gravity that like pulls us all together. So I think like that's one thing, is just like if you do organically make those connections with people, especially if you're in a smaller team, like under 100 people, then that might be enough. If you do want to build something that feels more structure, that has more structure, I always say, like, first find a couple of people, find 2, 3, 4 other people who share your identity, that share your interest, and just meet, just connect, go get lunch, have coffee, like, I don't know, go for a walk or something, but just chat with folks and get a sense of like what's going on in their worlds, work-wise. How do they, what do they need from like a sense of community at work? Rather than going in saying, I'm going to have this really long list of things that we want to accomplish when you don't even know what your team actually needs. Because this is the resource part of employee resource groups. So I think just focus on understanding why each person is even showing up to this conversation, what they want to get out of it. And I think once you have some clarity around the purpose of the group and you want to implement more structure, that's when I would say, go find the person in your organization who can probably help you formalize that. Yeah. So that might be like someone on the people or HR team. If you're in a bigger organization, maybe you have a diversity, equity, and inclusion person, but work with them to start to kind of lay out like, hey, here's what we're thinking. Here's kind of our vision. Here's what we think people need. Here's kind of the support and resources that we need. how can you help us, get this off the ground?
And there's kind of a strength in numbers too, as you were saying. Like if you can get sort of even a handful of people together who can kind of go to HR together and be like, hey, we want to start this, there's a little bit more likelihood that they'll help you kind of move to the next stage of that too.
Yeah, and I think even in companies or employers that don't have sort of like a formal sort of DEI function or program, I'm finding that like a lot of companies just understand the importance of having spaces for people to build community because it helps with retention. Like they want to keep great people around. So if this is like a lower lift way for them to do it, like I think a lot of, even if they don't know exactly what to do, they might be going and doing their own Googling and researching. I found that in working with HR folks too, but a lot of people are willing to help.
Yeah. I think it was Gallup. Somebody has a study out there that shows that employee resource groups lead to stronger employee engagements in an organization. It just sort of helps, as you were sort of saying, with the overall morale of employees in the workplace. Let's say we have an established ERG and it's 2025. How can we continue to sort of actively keep them moving and sort of preserve the work of what an ERG can be doing today?
Whenever I talk about this, I almost feel the need to like timestamp the conversation to be like, okay, this is fall 2025. We'll see in 6 months what guidance I give. Because we are in this sort of ever-changing landscape, unfortunately. My guidance is still the same as what I would offer at the very beginning, which is like, listen to your members. Like really be responsive to their needs as whenever possible. I think ERG leader burnout is a real problem. It's actually not talked about very much, but it's very common. And sometimes that happens because maybe they're planning events, people stop showing up to events instead, or they're posting in a Slack channel and no one's responding with emojis, and they're like, "What have I done?" Like, but like, go back to your roots and just spend some time talking to people and figure out what they need. In terms of like how you run it and the structure. So something I was curious about coming into 2025, knowing that there was going to be more legal challenges to DEI work in the workplace, I was curious about what happened with ERGs. And something that I think has held true, and I think this was guidance we were really giving beforehand, which is just like these ERGs can and should exist. You should keep them open to everyone and be focused and clear about what you're offering and who it's for. So if you're hosting a lunch, share, hey, we're hosting a lunch for fill in the blank group. Here's what we're going to be covering today. Here's how you can attend. So rather than making it this sort of closed off secret club, make it open to everyone, but be really clear that, because we obviously don't want to, again, psychological safety, we don't want to invite too many people in who aren't going to understand us, but keeping it open so that it is an inclusive space. And something else I've seen is being able to partner with either other ERGs in the organization.
Yes, there's a lot of strength in that.
Yeah, I think even being able to partner with them to troubleshoot, share ideas, take an intersectional focus to your work as well. That can be another way to try to preserve and sustain them. Like there's, again, that strength in numbers. So that's also something I recommend.
Well, and that's key too, because when we think about ERGs, and it really does help to sort of frame it with having multiple ERGs sort of working together, there's this want sometimes that comes up of the employees in the ERG that want to like go a certain direction with sort of the work or the ideas or sort of the goals or things, but you still have to manage the business needs of an organization, especially if you're in a corporate work environment, especially in a for-profit situation. How do employees, how do companies, how do we balance these two sometimes at odds, things of like having to run the business and keep the business objectives, but also maintaining, again, psychological safety, but also the needs of employees in a resource group?
This is a tough one, and it just makes me think of some of the instances where even within ERGs, I've seen a lot of intergroup conflict because there's sort of misalignment about what the group should be doing. Even I've seen two co-leaders butting heads about like the purpose of the group and what they should be working on and who they should be serving. So for me, this feels like this is a good moment to kind of step back and focus on like alignment As much as I'm trying to avoid throwing too much corporate jargon here.
Yeah.
But alignment is important. Just making sure that you are on the same page and what the organization is trying to accomplish as a whole, rather than kind of operating in this vacuum over here. If you're trying to figure out whether you want to focus on or advocate for a particular thing, like zoom out, look at your organization's cultural artifacts. So I would say start with company vision, mission, values, handbook, any kind of internal philosophies or frameworks about how your organization thinks about inclusion. If your group is structured and has some kind of charter or some kind of document that really lays out what is the purpose and function and like operating rhythm of the group, like, again, go back to all of this stuff first to be able to say, we have this idea, this thing we want to do, or we're passionate about this thing, we want to see this change. How does it fit into these other frameworks? Like, how does it fit into what the organization is trying to accomplish? Because you can't do everything. Like, you know, you're not a therapy group. You are also not HR. You're not solely responsible for fixing your own problems. So I think being honest about what is like within the scope of your group and what you can accomplish. And also, like, a lot of folks are not paid in this work.
No, it's usually volunteer. Yeah.
They do compensate them, but that's pretty rare.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I usually find that any form of compensation tends to come in like special training, like they'll pay for the training that you can benefit from, but you're mostly still volunteer work. Yeah. And I like the reframe of that too. You know, always a good reminder that we're not therapists in this work. And while there is a benefit to us to have it, it is absolutely not and cannot be therapy. I think that's such a critical thing to sort of remind people.
If there's something that you want to see changed and it feels like it's falling out of the scope of your ERG or the organization, like, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just maybe you're wanting to do some more advocacy work and you're hitting walls within your organization. Look beyond your workplace. Like, there's so many other community organizations and causes where you can get involved. So this doesn't necessarily have to be the only outlet. So also looking at what are other ways in which you can affect change, rather than, if you feel like you're hitting a wall in an organization, like, don't let that stop you. And, you know, find the right channel for like the kind of work you want to do.
I love that, because that leads me to my next question. I hate networking. I cringe at it so much, because you know, with my autism and ADHD, networking can be really difficult. But I've always found that if I have a vehicle like ERGs, I can network with ease. So I'm just sort of wondering, you know, and even what you just described, you know, using the ERGs for outside of work opportunities, you know, what are some ways that we can kind of find networking opportunities, especially if, you know, we have different identities that we're coming to this with, you know, what is some advice that you have for that?
You're not alone. I think a lot of people, I mean, I think there have even been points in my career where I'd kind of like bristled at this idea of like networking. In my head, I also had the wrong idea about it. I felt like I needed to like show up to some mixer with like 100 strangers. It's loud. People are standing around with like, I don't know, like a glass of wine, and like there's like some lukewarm like meat and cheese tray over in the corner. And like you have to go and shake a bunch of hands and pass out business cards and like hope that like something magically works out from that. And having gone to a lot of events like that, I can tell you that's not the best way to do it. Before we even get into the how of networking, like reframe it as community building. When we think about a network, we're thinking about how do we sort of build these connections around us. And that's also what community is. Community is being able to build this sort of space that's built around shared values, shared purpose, where we ask for what we need and we offer what we can. And I think looking at networking through that lens makes it feel a lot more human. Again, I will always kind of go back to like, think about what do you need. So if there are particular types of settings that just don't work for you, maybe from like a social standpoint, like the social structure doesn't make sense, or from a sensory perspective, it doesn't, it's just overwhelming, overstimulating, maybe too much or too little structure. I think being mindful of that so that you can pick the right avenue that's going to work for you. What are different communities or organizations that you could potentially get involved with? Or like LGBTQ folks, for example, like I'm involved in a number of different LGBTQ professional groups where they might have online communities, which is another way to interact and network without having to be face-to-face in a room full of strangers.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at these community spaces where maybe it's like an intersection of like your identity and your industry, for example. So maybe it's like queer people in the tech industry or queer people in finance as one example, where start with that because then you already have 2 points in common with everyone there.
And there's a chance you might know somebody who knows somebody too. I mean, if when you kind of drill in a little bit, there's a higher chance of like, oh, I know we have a similar connection of some kind.
I think it's also why I like really picking like a few community spaces that really resonate with you, or even just start with one. Find one that like really aligns with your values, your interests, where you feel like you can get something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you keep showing up, you start to see the same people who also keep showing up, and then you start building real relationships. So that was a learning for me in my career, was when I started going to events hosted by the same people or the same organizations. I've literally made friends, like real non-work friends at these things, just because we crossed paths so many times and had so many conversations, because there's a familiarity piece that feels good, but then you start to find the people whose values connect with yours.
Yeah, that's good.
Who also respect and value you as a person and how you're showing up.
One thing that I respect and love how you show up is your newsletter. I absolutely love your newsletter. I think it's phenomenal. And I only just discovered it a few weeks ago, but I love it. I think everybody should sign up for it. But in addition to your newsletter, what I know people can come with to work with you for coaching. So how do people connect with you? What kind of coaching do you offer? Of course, the newsletter. Talk a little bit brag about yourself for a minute.
Oh, my worst nightmare, bragging about myself. So I'm a career coach for LGBTQ people specifically. I do also work with allies. My goal, if you're not familiar with what career coaches do, we really help people find inner clarity about their relationship with work and really help people create plans to achieve the goals that they've set for themselves, maybe even help them define those goals. So it's less so about like just giving advice on kind of where to go, but more about how do we ask ourselves the right questions to find the answers that we might already have in ourselves, and maybe doing some research along the way. I work primarily with queer folks who are really navigating what I call moments that matter. So these are things like career transitions, job searches, navigating tricky workplace topics and situations, things like internal politics, self-advocacy, professional development. You've probably heard this through our conversation, but my ethos in this work is that we really deserve a career that honors like who we are and what we need, rather than just who we should be or who we think we should be.
Absolutely.
So I think rather than trying to take this very like assimilationist kind of like, you have to do this, this, and this, and you'll get what you want. I work with such a diverse, group of humans that like I know that one size doesn't fit all. So size doesn't fit all. So it's really about, I do a lot of work with folks to identify, what they need, what they want, and to start to build a plan to be able to achieve those things over time. For folks who are maybe coaching curious, or maybe you're just looking for something that's a little bit more like kind of just in time, I do single session power hours where we kind of look at like one topic and really drill into it for that 1 hour. But I also do 3 and 6 month coaching packages. So we work together over, a shorter or longer period of time to start to build those goals and that strategy. And I do for folks who they have maybe financial constraints about coaching, around coaching. I do have a limited number of 20-minute pay what you can sessions specifically for queer and trans folks, because I know the landscape is a lot right now.
Yes.
So I do also still do pay what you can sessions.
My thanks to Alex for their time today. For more information about Alex, check out the link in the description where you can find out more about the work that they do, how to connect with them, all the things that they talked about in the video, and also how to sign up for their newsletter, which again, I'm an absolutely huge fan of. I love this newsletter. It's really been very helpful for me quite a bit. For more details on that and how to subscribe to my Substack and some of my other channels, be sure to check that out in the description below. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow. If you've got a topic you'd like for me to cover on my channel, do let me know. I'm very responsive in the comments. Or if you have a guest or somebody that you'd like for me to interview, let me know that as well. Thanks for watching, and please be sure to check out some of the other videos and or podcasts that I have while you're here. Thanks for watching.